Welcome to another episode of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Ron Carucci. I'll tell you about Ron in just a moment. As you know, Grace Under Pressure reveals the soft stuff, the caring, the connecting, and the commitment we feel toward others. And grace for me is the the generosity we show, the respect we give, and the compassion we demonstrate. And when you do it as a leader, like Ron is, especially during tough times, it requires the ability to act for others and energize everyone around us. Welcome, Ron.
John, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Good. I want to tell folks a little bit about you. Ron, he's in Seattle, and he is the founder and co-founder and managing partner at Navalent. It works with CEOs and executives in the issue and the idea of transformational change. He's been in this business for more than 30 years. He's worked with startups as well as Fortune 10 companies. Those are the really big ones. Like me, Ron writes for Forbes, and he also writes for HBR. And I will tell you, every time I read one of Ron's pieces, I just kind of go, darn, I wish I would have written that, because Ron is not only a great writer, a wordsmith, he's got wonderful research and insights. So he's the best-selling author of 8 books, and he also does lots of research, including a 10-year longitudinal study on executive transition to find out why more than 50% of leaders, that 50%, fail within the first 18 months. That's kind of scary. So and these findings are highlighted in his new book, Rising to Power, which he co-authored with Eric Hansen. Ron's a former faculty member at Fordham Graduate School. He's taught at the Center for Creative Leadership, which is really cool. And he's worked for a who's who list of the major companies. Microsoft just coincidentally happens to be in the Seattle area. The Hershey Company, which is in Pennsylvania, and Ohio Health, Del Monte Foods, McDonald's, and even the CIA, which I didn't know that he'd worked for the CIA. And had I known that at the end, when I booked him, I might have been a little bit nervous. But anyway, Ron, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you.
John, a pleasure to be with you. Always a joy to talk to you.
Good. I always like to begin these shows with the pressure that executives are feeling. As you teach, coach, and research, what are you hearing? What are executives telling you?
I think there's this bifurcation that you have some leaders who are in a little bit of denial and trying to sort of wrangle things back to what they knew. And you have some leaders who are paralyzed. They've not yet figured out how to deal with so many things that are out of their control. And right. I don't know that I think the pandemic caused that, but I think the pandemic certainly revealed people's needs for control were maybe stronger than they thought. Right. And so the ability to have grace in a moment that you can control, to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to be okay not knowing things, and to help others be okay with those things. If you didn't have it before, this was not the time to try and get it. Right. And so I think many leaders are scrambling for how to survive.
You raise a very interesting point about paralysis. And early in the pandemic, I know that one of our colleagues talked about some of our colleagues that we know just jumped on this whole thing and pivoted and embraced it wholeheartedly. Others sort of took their time and said, I just need to digest this. Is this where some leaders are, or is it outright paralysis that you're seeing, Ron?
Well, I think it's either paralysis of like running on ice, right? Or it's paralysis of I just can't. They're so fearful of moving because everything they try seems to be wrong, or they're interpreting the signals as wrong, right? So they'll try something, they'll get a triggered reaction from an employee or a customer, or they'll make a decision about finances and then there'll be other implications. And what they haven't figured out is that that's not necessarily bad things. Right? Sometimes you're making the best decision you can with the best information that you have, and there'll be fallout from that. And there's not going to be there won't be any perfect solutions because we have no playbook for this. And so, but their origins in a very ordered, predictable world, in a very controlled environment, at least in their mind controlled. Suddenly, those guardrails are gone now, and so they flinch at their own moves rather than just sort of saying, "Look, you're going to break some glass here. You're going to skin your knees. That's just what this moment is in life, and be okay with that." But for many leaders, they're just not.
Right. That's a tough equation. If you've always been, especially the the principles of management is all about order, whereas by contrast, leadership is much more free flowing. We have our principles of it, but it's there. You do what is good for the team, which is easy to say, and it's very flexible. But management wants, and rightly so, is that ordered stuff.
Yeah.
So you also do a lot of work, of course, in organizational culture. What effects are you seeing on the impact of culture in our world right now? Or what?
Well, I think we have a lot of forces converging on us right now, John. Certainly the pandemic isn't helping in terms of putting people into these hybrid environments where you have we's and they's, homes and aways in the offices. So the isolation we're feeling is certainly debilitating. You have tremendous amount of uncertainty with civil unrest and racial injustice that people don't know how to make sense of, right? We don't have good language to talk about it openly and honestly. We certainly lack skill, especially as white people, to have good conversations about those things. And then you have this thing called an election that's coming up. That's fueling all kinds of anger and irrational rage and people's inability to be civil with each other. So you've got this boiling pot, right? And it is spilling over into organizational cultures.
Right.
And so leaders are trying to figure out, where are the boundaries? Where does our culture start and stop? How can our cultures help hold this container of chaos? And what are some things that are probably not best brought into the workplace at all?
Right.
But then if I try and keep them out of the workplace, they're just going to come in the back door. Okay. So I think there's so many precedents for leaders when it comes to testing the boundaries of their culture and the kinds of values they want to live by that have not been tested against these kinds of conditions.
That's right. It's interesting you talked about the pressure that culture, the pressure that leaders are on, which of course has the impact on the culture. And you talked about something about the boundaries of culture. Explain that a little bit. I mean, what should there be boundaries, or tell me about it?
Well, I think it's a word you and I both know that has a million different meanings to a million different people. But a culture is an ethos. It's the genetic material of how a company operates. And it should be shaped based on what that company needs to do, the purpose it serves. It's not just, we put a bunch of values on the wall like teamwork, integrity, and diversity, and we want to value those. Well, if those values don't serve your purpose, you shouldn't have them, right? Too often we reach for the values lever when we want to fix something. There's been a scandal, now we value integrity. There's been a bunch of lawsuits, now we value diversity. Right. We missed a bunch of product launches, now we value speed.
Yeah.
People see right through that, and then now you're just weaponizing your culture.
Yeah. That's a good way of doing it. It's interesting. None of us know what is our new normal is. Where one of the reasons for this show is to explore ideas of people like yourself who are helping leaders create their new normal. But one thing I'd like to say, and I'll let your feedback, is that while we don't know what the new normal is, I'd like to believe that the values we held in January of 2020 will be the values that help shape us in going forward. Agree or disagree? So.
I'm going to put it with an asterisk, depends. Because if your values were self-interest, ambition, and greed, I'm not sure I want to bring those forward. I think our values were certainly tested this year. I would like to think that what many people chose to do was re-examine what those values are and double down on the ones that serve them well, but maybe reconsider some of the values that maybe don't serve them well anymore. You can value efficiency to an extreme degree. Maybe we don't need to value that as much as we thought. So accountability is another one. I think our definitions of accountability have been completely upended, and thank God for that.
Yeah.
So I hope that we will be principle-based in how we navigate forward.
It's interesting. I'm glad you put this caveat, because when I speak of values, I always mean it in the senses of the positive sense. I equate values with virtue. But you gave us a good reminder when you were delineating reasons businesses go fail is, if they're slow, their speed, or ethics in reaction to unethical behavior, all of those things. But also you just mentioned self-interest and some other things. So it's good to remember that values, or our principles, may cut both ways. So it's a good reminder, Ron.
Well, it's also important to remember that there's the values we speak and espouse, and there's the values that are actually revealed by our behavior. Okay. And those often don't match.
Yeah. And this leads into a topic that I know you're exploring for a new book, I think, and a new work on ethics. Tell us about the study that your company Navalent is doing.
Yeah, so we did a 15-year longitudinal study. We talked to more than 3,200 leaders as part of a broader set of diagnostic work. And we use some really cool artificial intelligence. We used IBM Watson to help quantify some of the meaning in this data. And we decided not to go into the research with stated hypothesis. We decided, let's see how intelligent the technology is. Let it tell us what we should be asking it. And we found some amazing drill sites that predict the conditions under which people will lie, cheat, or serve their own interests. And so I then interviewed 30 or 40 wonderful thought leaders in the world: Jonathan Haidt, Amy Edmondson, Hubert Joly, Rob Bilott, just to get a whole bunch of principles. And we basically found 4 conditions under which you can predict in your organizations that people will tell you the truth, treat people fairly, and serve a greater good, and under which conditions they won't.
And what are those conditions?
So we define the word honesty as the collection of the data show that these are all closely correlated: truth, justice, and purpose. It takes all 3 to have honesty. Say the right thing, do the right thing, and say and do the right thing for the right reason. You can have 1 or 2 of them, but that isn't honesty. It's something else. Okay. So the 4 conditions were strategic clarity, be who you say you are. If you say this is our purpose, this is our values, you have to live it. And when you don't, you institutionalize duplicity. So you now told your organization, we say one thing and do another. And when you do that, you're now 3 times more likely to have people lie and cheat. Accountability, meaning when our accountability is seen as fair, with dignity and justice, meaning how I'm paid, but how my work is treated with dignity. If people see it as fair, you're 4 times more likely to have people tell you the truth and be honest and purposeful. Third was governance. So is my decision-making transparent? Can I decode the way choices get made? Do I have access to information that I trust? Or do I have to go to the rumor mill and underground to get it? And if your governance is seen as transparent, and I can and the meetings you have in your governance systems have open exchanges of conversation, not orchestrated theater, I now know that you now know you're 3.5 times more likely to have people tell you the truth and be honest. And the last one, most surprising us, was border wars, organizational unity. When your silos are stitched together, when you have integration and cohesion at the seams of your organization versus border wars and silos, the factor here was high, it was 6. You're 6 times more likely to have people tell you the truth and be honest. Because when we fragment the organization, we fragment the truth. And now we have dueling truths. The scary part, John, and then I'll turn it back to you, the statistics were cumulative. So if you have all 4 of those conditions in your organization, you're 16 times more likely to have people tell you the truth, be fair, and do the right thing. Or you're 16 times more likely to have people put you in a headline you never wanted to be in.
Right. That's absolutely fascinating. And it leads into my next question about lying. You did a piece for HBR called Why Lying Becomes the Norm. And I think if I can infer, it's because it's a failure of those 4 things you just talked about. Am I correct? So
that's exactly right, John. We turn otherwise honest people into fibbers. We create the conditions in which which telling the truth is not the safe thing to do. We have management quarterly MBRs, our governance processes. We all sit in those meetings and we watch the person in the front of the room report on the last quarter, forecast the next quarter, and we're all privately thinking in our heads, this is such crap. The only thing we'll say is, wow, Bill, that's interesting forecast. And that's as far as we'll go to telling the truth. What we're telling the organization in that moment is, this is how we do it. We don't say what's real and honest. We say what looks like wants to be said. But out in the hallway, that's when we'll have the real conversation.
Is that akin to something I call it the disease of nice, which is the failure to tell straight talk? So
I think niceness or the conflict aversion and the reason is certainly a part of a disease. I think it's fueled by the fact that the withholding of truth is certainly a version of dishonesty. Distorting the truth or embellishing it are two other versions of it, right? And so if I know the forecast you're giving me by the way, I know the last 4 quarters, you've never hit the forecast you gave then. But somehow we're going to collude with you, and we're just going to nod our heads, knowing full well you're not going to meet this one either.
Right.
Now you've created an organization where the truth has to hide, and so now people have to ask themselves, can I be myself? Can I be true to me? And so now the version of me showing up in the room is the version I think you want,
Okay.
not the version I really want to bring.
What you're talking about, the line is actually failure to tell the truth or fail to address the truth. Does this culture also lead to ethical transitions or transgressions?
The closest correlation there in the research, and this is well documented by most of the academicians, is the unfairness one. When people view a process as unfair, how you allocate resources, how you set your budgets, how you select people for jobs, how you hold me accountable. When I think it's unfair, when you hear as a leader, if you hear the word unfair, let red alarms go off. That is the time that people feel entitled to take. When I've been wronged, I'm going to extract my pound of flesh.
Right.
And that's where the line begins to move. And you know what? Every entrance to every slippery slope is paid with, this doesn't apply to me. And the ones we most are at risk of sliding down are the ones we think we never go down. Right. And so those lines move very subtly.
Great. You raised an interesting point there. So you work with executives, and if they say, Ron, I'm hearing that my executive or that my team is feeling that they're being treated unfairly or there's an unfairness, what's your advice to them?
Well, I want to know what's unfair, because sometimes the flip side is that you have entitlement, right? It's not fair. I didn't get my way. You have some cultures that are very immature that grew up in a sense that empowerment means you get to do what you want. Autonomy you get to have your own way all the time. And inclusion means you get invited to every meeting, right? And so now you've created unrealistic expectations that the moment you have to disappoint somebody, suddenly it's not fair. So I want to make sure that the decision we're talking about, the process we're talking about really is inequitable versus just disliked. Because your job as a leader, we all know, is not to please people. Your job, a leader's job is to disappoint people at a rate they can absorb. And if you're not able to do that, and you've bought people's loyalty by accommodating them over and over and over again, the first time you say no, it's not going to be fair. And in some ways, it wasn't. That you trained them to get their way for so long isn't fair. But that doesn't mean the process of a decision was unfair. If in fact there is inequity, meaning you have a favorite, right? All of our organizations have roles we privilege. Tech companies privilege engineers. Branded companies privilege marketers. Right, so many financial-driven, growth-driven companies privilege P&L owners. So if in fact there are privileges that are not equally accessible, if there are opportunities not equally accessible, if there are ways you promote people that aren't, then you have an issue. And I think you have to ask yourself, how do I level the playing field?
Okay. You use a term, and I always like this. You kind of, in the next couple of questions, we're going to do this. You take terms that we all know, and then you put a twist on it. And one is strategic clarity, and you say the lack of it causes trouble. Tell me about that.
Well, I think you probably seen this in your work, John. If you went around the table of an executive team and said, "Tell me our strategy," you'd probably get as many different answers as there are people in the room. So we have a lot of counterfeits for the word strategy. We have mission and vision and values. We have annual operating plans. We have product quotas. We have stretch goals. But by strategy, what that means is, why are you here? Why do you have a right to win? Why would people choose you over the person you compete with? And that fundamental question of identity is often unanswered or so diluted and so fragmented that it means a million things. So first of all, you have to know who you are so that you can be who you say you are. Both of those problems exist. One is even large multinational companies have lost sight of who they are. They try to be so many things to so many people that they're really nothing to anybody. So you have the issue of we don't really know who we are, which is that's when people start making things up, right? They start doing desperate mergers and acquisitions. They start launching products they shouldn't launch. They start getting into businesses they shouldn't be in because they're grasping at straws. Right. But even for the company that does know who they are, declaring it is one thing, being it's another. So you can say that you value service, and above your call center, it says treat the customer well, but you're measuring the call center rep on time on call. So you're incenting them to get off the call. right? So those little disconnects accumulate over time and cause people to behave in ways that belie who you say you are, or force them to. And then they feel bad about it. They feel shame, they feel guilt, they feel resentment. And so it's really important that we as leaders examine all the places where who we say we are and what we're actually doing may not match the way we think it is. When you're on top, it all looks just grand. But when you're on the ground, it may not look that way. And if you can assume that because most leaders assume we declared it, we really meant it when we declared it. So doesn't that mean we are it? And they don't realize how far those gaps can widen over time if you don't take the time to examine them.
That's a great the great dichotomy. The look from the top looks great, and the look from up from the bottom doesn't, which leads into the sense of accountability. And you posit that accountability can sometimes be unjust. So tell me about that.
Well, so here, if you were in a room and you asked a room full of any professionals and asked them, how many of you really look forward to your performance appraisal? You would probably not have anybody raise their hand. Or your quarterly check-in review, or the monthly performance review for the department. Why is it that the conversations about our contributions, right, the things that should be the most sacred experience of an employee, are the things we most dread? We've dehumanized them. We started scaling sameness as fairness, right? We're going to treat everybody the same, which is cruel, right? So today in a knowledge economy, when our remit is an idea, an analysis, an insight, our imagination, a radical thought, it's no longer I'm making widgets anymore, right? So the connection of the contribution and the contributor are so much more fused than ever. So when I treat the contribution as sameness, I'm neutralizing the contributor, and that's insulting.
Right.
And so as a leader, now our job is to understand that you cannot treat them as different. You can say all you want, don't take it personally, it's just business or it's just a process. But, the fact of the matter is, when I give you my work, I'm giving you a part of who I am. And so the uniqueness of that requires a very different way to hold people accountable than just filling out a form or putting a number. How many times have you seen somebody after getting their performance appraisal? I mean, the veins are. I had a client a few months ago. She gave me a 3. I've always been a 4. How could you do that? I was a 5 at my last company, but just because she has a quota now, I have to get a 3.
Yeah.
It was irrational, right? I mean, literally, we know from neuroscience that our brains are triggered with threat in our amygdala when we get categorized.
Yep.
Even if you're put in the best category, you're still triggered because you feel invisible.
Yeah.
So all of those things make accountability really unjust because they're dehumanizing. We've taken away dignity and we've taken away justice. And accountability should be the arbiter of dignity and justice in our organization. People should be thrilled to have the opportunity to sit and talk about what they did. And even when they fell short, even when they could get better, those should be sacred conversations, and they become, robotic.
Well, is it that I would posit that all organizations are not that way, but is it because we're rating people on a numeric scale? And I'm not dismissing metrics, but just at what you just said about having an open and honest conversation, like how you did, Ron. Hey, Ron, you tackled this big objective, and and flying colors and all this. But as you go forward, Ron, I want you to be a little more in contact with your team. That's pretty honest feedback, isn't it? So tell me where it's going wrong.
So I love that conversation, John. I don't think we're having that conversation.
Okay.
I don't think leaders are doing it. I think they're saving it all up for the end of the year, filling out the form, or having you fill out the form and give it to me, and then I'll add my comments to it. If we're having those kinds of conversations on a regular basis, and I feel like you see me and know me for who I am, that's cool. Yeah. What you put on the form doesn't matter then. But the process itself of we set goals, we check in once or twice in the year, we document at the end of the year, we force it into a set of categorization. It doesn't, whether the categories are numbers or names, superior, grand, average, below, whatever. I feel missed in the process.
Sure.
And that's when you eclipse the contributor from the contribution, that's when things go wrong.
That's great. Yeah. I mean,
you described is as a master class. If we could make that the standard, and make the intimacy, the vulnerable intimacy between a leader and a follower about that, make that the core, we'd be in great shape.
Well, part of that, and you know this very well, is that so often performance reviews are tied to compensation, as opposed to coaching conversations, which is what I just did a couple of minutes ago. Those should be occurring all of the time. Do you advise your folks you work on to do that? So
I absolutely do. And lots of more progressive companies are smart, have standing one-on-ones with leaders and their followers. But then if you examine what's happening in those one-on-ones, they're 30 minutes, they're 45 minutes. In some cases, they're 20 minutes. I don't know what you talk about in 20 minutes. Google prides itself on getting through its performance reviews in 20 minutes. I don't know what we're doing there, but
so that's because they know everything about you anyway, because they hear in your email. Yeah. Sorry, Google, just joking there.
Yes, scheduling the one-on-one is not the issue, right? If it's a quality conversation, a mutual exchange of good feedback about what's working well and what's not, both ways, to the boss and to the follower. And if the person walks away from that conversation going, wow, that was really helpful. Oh, wow, I feel really proud. Or I feel really affirmed. Or I feel like I learned something. Or I want to improve that. If that's what they're walking away with, great. If they're walking away saying, could use that 30 minutes to get lunch.
Right.
And so it's all in that, not just that you put it on the calendar, but is the nature of what that experience is beneficial for both of you.
Before we close out, I wanted to ask you, bring up the concept of governance. And we know that governance, certainly we're seeing that in our political process now, where many of us feel there is no governance. But in corporate, what gives there, and what advice do you have about good governance?
It's really, we're in thousands of meetings a day, and most of them shouldn't even be happening, right? But at the end of the day, governance answers the question of what leaders should be around what tables, with what authority and what resources, making what decisions. If all roads lead to a senior team, don't be shocked when people say we feel disempowered.
Yeah.
When people walk into the room saying, what are we here to do? Or after the meeting, if they're saying, did somebody make a decision? What was the decision? Or people walk out and go, 5 different versions of what decision was made. Or you walk into the meeting and say, we're here to make this decision, but it's real clear you actually made it yesterday, and your job is to now make it look like we're making a decision. That's where things go wrong, right? And so if the quality of those conversations, first of all, if the people gathered around the table don't know why they're there, don't know what their authority and decision rights are, and aren't clear what decisions they get to make and at what cadence, and what other groups they have to link to, you have a meeting that shouldn't be happening. But if you get that part right, then you have to make sure that the people in the room are having the right conversations with the right data, with the right openness and spark, with the right dissent. And so it's the structure of who you're putting in the rooms at what intervals to make what choices, and then what they're doing when they get in the room.
It's a concept, and I'll tie it back to what we began with the uncertainty that all of us are feeling right now. And if I'll throw in a word that is yours about governance, governance gives us a clear governance. It gives us a clarity, call it purpose. It's anchored in our purpose. So we know why we're here and what we can do and how we contribute. That, I would say, would help us gain clarity as we look at inside, but also, most importantly, deal with the outside world. Would you agree? So.
Absolutely. Your governance opportunities, when you gather people in a room, is, first of all, it's expensive, right? So if you're going to put people in a room together, make sure, whether it's 30 minutes or 2 hours, make it a quality experience, make it a quality conversation, make people learn something they didn't learn before, make them solve a problem you couldn't solve alone, make them make sense of the world around them, give them a chance to get to know each other better. Talk about how they're metabolizing the pandemic or what's happening at home, especially if half the people in the room are actually on a screen and half of them are 6 feet apart around a table. All the more reason why that cohesion, that sense of camaraderie, that sense of unity has to take more time to form. If you just get in, get out, which I think many of the virtual meetings are just sort of being more efficient, you have to create the time for the social glue that you used to have when you're in the office. You have to add more time for that so that the people on the screen feel as much in the room as the people who are actually in the room.
That's a big challenge that I call it the hybrid workplace, if you will. I'm borrowing it from somebody, whatever, but it's a significant number of our people are working remotely, virtually, and then some people are working in an office. And how do we balance it? What does that do to our culture? And I think you've given us, with all the ideas you've given us today, there is a kind of clarity, was my word, or personal clarity and purpose, organizational clarity, strategic intention. All of these things add up. So, Ron, before I close, I ask all of our guests, is there a story of grace that you want to share?
So just yesterday, I spent the day in Los Angeles. I was doing the final interview for my book, and I interviewed two gentlemen who they came out of the rival gangs in Los Angeles, the Crips and the Bloods, and they've been in and out of jail. They could have chosen to see each other as enemies, but many years ago they struck up an incredible friendship against the risk of the gangs they were part of. Eventually, decided they didn't want to sell drugs anymore. They didn't want to be violent. They were tired of going to their friends' funerals. And one of them went to cooking school, came back, and they started a food business together. And they've started an incredible company. And they are now employing people from their neighborhood and giving people jobs and making people bosses and growing this incredible brand. And now they're being asked by celebrities like Kobe Bryant and Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart and Justin Bieber to come cook for these celebrities. And, but they've not lost sight of who they are. The grace I saw in their friendship, the incredible, fierce commitment to each other and the love they have for each other was remarkable. To sit in their presence and hear their story was grace for me, to be humbled by the chance to tell their story, but to watch how they live their story and the unapologetic pain they have suffered and have redeemed into the way they live their life was such an incredible example. So I'm still riding the high of that story.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can you share the name of that company? It's
called Trap. Yes, and by the way, I got to eat the food too. Killer. Trap Kitchen. They got the name because people thought it was a drug house because people were coming to that. They were cooking in the kitchen and people were coming in and out of the house with the food. They redeemed the word trap, and trap in their world stands for take risks and prosper.
What a great story. Ron, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you for the grace that you show. And I know you share that with your clients who are fortunate. I say that truly fortunate to work with you. And Ron, how can people find you?
Yeah. So come and stay in touch with us. Come and visit us at navalent.com. If you are struggling with the virtual workplace, we have a brand new ebook called Designing Your Virtual Workplace. So come visit us at navalent.com/virtual. If you're in the middle of a big transformation, we have another ebook called Leading Transformation. So come at navalent.com/transformation. Follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, but please do stay in touch.
Great.
And stay safe.
Hey, Ron, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll be out. So.